Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Jason. How are you doing this Sunday evening?
Well, it's a little different for us. We're doing a little bit of an early record because, it is summer and holidays are being taken. So we're just going to do the recording here a little bit early, and hopefully in the course of the beginning of this week, no massive news comes together. Otherwise, we're going to have missed out on it. But we have lots of things, I think, still to talk about anyway from the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to dive into it.
Okay, but before we get started, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
Pretty self-explanatory in the name, but we focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and players from Calgary's soccer community, all the way from grassroots and amateur up to the university and professional level.
This week, we're going to talk about Cavalry's match in Vancouver and also preview their upcoming match in Ottawa. We're going to talk about the League One Alberta men's final and what's happening with Blizzard in the interprovincial championships, and a couple other notes about Cavalry U21. And we also have an interview this week. Scott, who's our interview with?
Yeah, we actually interviewed him a while ago, but we've been kind of holding on to this episode for a good week to run it. And we talked to Mike Vandale earlier this summer. Some listeners may remember or know who that is, but Mike Vandale was like the financier behind the Calgary Storm in the early 2000s. So he was kind of like the chairman of the PDL and then A-League team from 2001 until 2003.
Interesting conversation. I certainly remember those games. I'm old enough to remember. And Scott, you covered the era of the Storm in your book, and it delves into this a lot as well.
Yeah, and Mike Vandale was one of the sources for those chapters about the Storm. So this was the second time I've interviewed him, and it was a pretty similar conversation, but very, neat to catch up with him. He's now out in Nova Scotia, so it was a little bit tough with the time change and everything, but we managed to get him on, and I'm excited to run that interview and show our listeners all that he has to say about soccer in Calgary and Canada in the early 2000s up to and including soccer in Canada and Calgary in the early 2020s.
But let's get started this week with what's going on with Cavalry FC.
Hey, this is Mason Trafford, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Yeah, they won, which they haven't done that much this year. They've drawn a lot, but wins have been rare. So this was a good result for them. They went out to Langley a few days ago and they beat Vancouver FC 1-0 thanks to a goal from Michael Vandale.
Does he not look really, really good since he's come back? I remember him being good last year, but he's just really come on very quickly.
I think he was quietly good last year. And the reason I say that is I think Ali Musi and Meyer Bevan and Willie Accio really, they had the spotlight because of some of their performances. But throughout last year, I was really impressed by Michael Vandale, especially considering how young he was. I think he was still 18 when he joined from Vancouver FC. Yeah, he's been injured for most of the season up until now. He's only had a couple of games off the bench. But this was his first start, and he was really the difference maker. He got the goal, but he could have had 2 or 3. He had some nice chances, and every time he got on the ball, he looked good.
I don't know. Overall, I thought Cavalry really was in control of this match. It seemed like a match where they had things going, and I didn't really feel like Vancouver was that much of a threat to get back into it, although there were a couple moments, I guess. But overall, I think Cavalry really had the run of play.
They did, yeah. They looked really composed on the ball, way more so than they have in other games that I've seen them play this year. And they also, we've talked how they're strong defensively, and they maintained that against Vancouver. Yeah, Dan Klomp had another strong game at the back. It was interesting that Charlie Trafford looked like he was playing defense rather than Callum Montgomery. He wasn't there, but no, I was really impressed by Cavalry defensively, and then their possession was way more calm than it has been against other teams. Even when they've been playing at home, their passing was a lot more crisp and confident. Yeah, it was a good game and a good result for Cavalry, and it puts them in the playoff contention just like that.
Yeah, that was really quick, wasn't it? A couple things to note from a player standpoint. Bradley Camden Fio got back and played the second half in this match, returning from injury. And it's good to see him back up in the lineup. And we also got to see, and I guess I've been saying it wrong, it's Lowell Wright. He made his debut for the Cavs. I think he got in with about, 15, 20 minutes left in the match?
Something like that. Yeah. And I like you have in your notes here. I mean, he had an immediate impact. He almost scored on practically his first touch. He had a nice shot, forced a save from Callum Irving onto the post.
Yeah, I was impressed in his the little bit of time he was playing. I'm not really sure though exactly where we're going to be at for fitness because he just joined the team and he has really not been training with any team that we know of over the last little while. So I'm not exactly sure how many minutes and how quickly he can build up his minutes. But man, if he comes in, for the last 30 minutes of some matches in the next few games, that could be really interesting, I think.
Yeah. And what I really liked about him was when Cavalry was in, the 90th, 92nd minute and they had to kill the game, just his strength on the ball. Like you see strikers do this where it's up to them to kind of shield the ball in the corner. And he did that role to perfection. I thought like there was no way you're going to muscle him off the ball. So I think he has a lot of physical strength, and I think he's going to offer something a little bit different that Cavalry really hasn't had this season. I do think, like obviously Tobias Warshevsky is a physical presence as well, but different kind of physical presence than Lowell Wright, who's just like super bulky and strong.
It's going to be fun to watch. I think for the remainder of the season, I think he could really be a useful piece to the puzzle for the Cavs this year.
So that was just a few days ago on Friday, but Cavalry have another game coming up on Sunday. They're traveling to Ottawa to take on Atletico. Obviously, Atletico are top of the table in the CPL, but they haven't looked that strong in their last couple of matches, have they?
Yeah, like they really got kicked around here by York on the weekend, 4-1. And I guess that also just says something for York. These guys really seem like they've got things figured out. But anyway, even before that, like the previous week, Valor came to Ottawa and Valor was able to pull out a 2-2 tie. So, they've been at the bottom of the table all year and they went in and to Ottawa's turf and were able to snatch a point. So I think, yeah, those are not exactly the two most impressive results for sure.
No, and I think I saw shortly before we recorded that Valor actually beat Pacific in Victoria. It's kind of interesting to see Valor's resurgence after such a tough start to the year for them. But no, I don't want to talk too much about the other teams in the CPL. But yeah, Ottawa, a little bit of a mediocre run of form for them. So could be a really interesting match. The last time these two teams played, it was a tie at Spruce Meadows. So very interesting to see how Sunday shapes up. Ottawa and Cavalry have tied both of their previous encounters this season. I'm expecting a tie, to be honest, but I've been pretty poor at predictions so far this year.
Well, I think the one thing this week is I think a draw would be much more satisfactory from Cavalry's standpoint as opposed to the last several weeks, because this seems like a match where you probably would be pretty satisfied with the draw. So
we'll see. And it'll be interesting to see like who plays for Cavalry, because I think Ali Musi's likely close to returning. And we talked about Lowell Wright getting a cameo in the last game. Bradley Camden Fewo is back. Kobza might be coming back soon. So Cavalry could have a lot more of their arsenal to draw upon. But yeah, I guess that's all TBD. We'll find out later this week when we see the pregame press conference.
My name is Mo Gander, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So let's move on to talk about League One Alberta. And we did have the men's division final happen over this past weekend. And it was pretty short notice, wasn't it, Scott?
Right. I mean, I was thinking this game is going to be on the 28th. And then I think on Friday morning, we see a tweet. Championship final is tonight in Edmonton. So it was a little disappointing. It was very short notice. I didn't end up watching it. I had other commitments that evening, but I did see that Edmonton Scottish beat Foothills 3-1 to give them I guess they won the regular season, and because of this game, they won the playoff championship as well.
Yep. So congrats to Scottish. They had a really good year. And I think in a lot of ways, it's even more impressive when you consider how weak they were last year. They really took the off season and figured things out. So, good on them.
Because they won the regular season, they have qualified for the 2025 Canadian Championship tournament. Very interesting to see how they do next year in that tournament. Probably going to be drawn against a CPL team.
I would expect so. And that'll be interesting because, typically speaking, the League One clubs typically go as visitors to a CPL venue. So we'll see. Who knows? Maybe it would even turn out next year that it could be Scottish against Cavalry at Spruce Meadows. That would be kind of interesting.
That would, yeah. I mean, and this is the first time an Alberta League One team, obviously, because it's the first year of the league. But we haven't seen how these semi-pro Alberta teams have done against pro opposition, whereas we've seen quite a few examples of Ontario, BC, and Quebec. I really hope that whoever they are drawn to play against, they do the province proud.
For sure. A little bit more news has come out about the Interprovincial Championship with Calgary Blizzard going to Hamilton here in a couple weeks. Well, I guess it's less than a couple weeks now. It's from the 9th to the 11th. We know their first match, who they're going to play against.
Yeah, so their first match is going to be on August 9th against the Whitecaps, which will be interesting because there's a player from Calgary on that team who we've talked about a lot in previous episodes.
If you listened to us last summer, we spent a lot of time talking about Kaylee Hunter. We haven't really talked about her anywhere near as much this year because she's been off in Vancouver playing for League One BC, but most people in the soccer world in the Calgary area consider her to be one of the real bright young stars out there. So,
and just to highlight, I know you jotted this down in the notes. Kaylee Hunter playing with that team or playing with the League One team, 8 goals in 11 matches. So she has, maintained her strong showing from 2023 and since playing for Canada U17s recently. So that's the BC representative. Calgary Blizzard will be the Alberta representative. So the other two, those being Ontario and Quebec, they'll be represented by NDC Ontario, like what you wrote down here, Jason, about their head coach.
Yes.
And then FC Montreal from Quebec.
The Quebec representative is affiliated with the Montreal MLS team. So I can't remember their exact name, but they're basically essentially being run at this point by Montreal CF of MLS. But yeah, I ran across this bit of information a few days ago, and the NDC Ontario team, which is representing League One Ontario, first place, top of the table, and their head coach, the guy has kind of been in the news the last week. Name is Joseph Lombardi.
Yeah, Joseph Lombardi was the analyst for Team Canada, one of the two convicted of flying the drone that spied on New Zealand at the Olympics. So can't imagine he'll be involved with this, but
I can't imagine he would be. And one of the things that I guess maybe hasn't really been made too clear in sort of the mass media is, in the mass media, it made it sound like it was just some guy who worked for Canada Soccer, but he's a seriously big time coach in Ontario. As you can tell, he's coaching this NDC team. So anyway, yeah, I'm guessing he won't be around.
No, but anyway, those will be the 4 teams competing in this interprovincial championship, and those matches, they are actually going to be on One Soccer. So from August 9th until 11th, you can check out this tournament.
Before we wrap things up on this topic, I did a little bit of digging and I was trying to figure out, last week we talked with Diogo Raposo about trying to assemble a roster for this tournament and the challenges involved. So after I talked to him, I kind of sat down and tried to figure out, so who actually is available and how much of the Blizzard roster could we actually see at this tournament? And surprisingly enough, it's actually a pretty decent chunk of it.
Well, if you think about the fact that a lot of UFC players are on the Blizzard team and that Diogo Raposo is head coach of both, they should be able to go, right? And there's, if you list off the Dinos players on this Blizzard team, that includes McKenna Walker, Rowan James, Grace Moore, Brooke Batty, and Julia Kittleson. So right there, you've got 5 or 6 players who you'd expect to be in action in Hamilton in a couple of weeks.
For sure. And then you've got Rachel Barlow, who is a recent grad of the Dinos, but she's been playing regularly. And there's a few other players who are also out of school now, someone like Aaliyah Coy, and also, Lauren Houghton, which former podcast guest Lauren Houghton from last year, she's she should be available. And there's a couple other players that they have around. And even, if you want to look at the AMSL, when we had Diogo on, he talked about bringing players in from there. Somebody like Kaylee Major, who is also with the Dinos, she's got 6 goals in 6 games in AMSL. Like, she's in 3rd place in the scoring race there. So, that's not a bad person to sort of add into the mix as well. So I think they're probably going to be okay. They're obviously not going to have everybody, but I think they're actually going to have some decent firepower.
Yeah, and I know that I don't know about the other U Sports players or Canada West players, but quite a few names here, so I want to rattle them off. Bryn Mortensen from MacEwan, Alyssa Danione from University of Saskatchewan, Ashlyn Phillips from UBC. So whether or not their university coaches will allow them to go to this tournament, I don't know if they would or not. I mean, obviously there's the risk of injury, but if they're keeping match fit, you have to think that would be okay with their university coaches.
This is Tommy Wheeldon Jr., and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
It's time to get to our interview of the week. And yes, we're taking a walk down memory lane again.
So as mentioned, we talked to Mike Vandale a few weeks ago, and we'll run that interview now. I'd like to welcome Michael Vandale to the podcast. Michael Vandale was the former owner of the Calgary Storm in the early 2000s. He now lives out in Nova Scotia near a place called Lunenburg. Mike, thank you for coming on our podcast this week.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Let's start by you giving us a bit of your background. You obviously lived in Calgary for a long time. I believe you were working in the oil and gas sector?
Right. I was sort of a serial entrepreneur, setting up oil and gas companies and selling them off through the 90s and 2000s. A great business. And but I had a love of soccer. And I knew at the time when I got into it, first one through the ball is going to be bloody. And it happened. But I got the Wheeldons, I got a bunch of other guys involved. So, the legacy is there, and it's all sort of worked out. And I mean, if we go into it, I couldn't help but thinking that Holger Osiek, with his blueprint for success back in 2000, really set the stage for getting coaches trained, having proper training scenarios. He really got it going. Before, people just used to roll the ball out and run around and kick and just, it was a beehive of activity. But you can really see, I mean, 20 odd years onwards, the real success of that program by Holger Osiek. I got a lot of time for him.
So you were in Calgary, and you were, as you mentioned, a serial entrepreneur. And I guess, I know you love soccer, but where did actually the idea of my next project I'm going to work on is I'm going to start a pro soccer team in Calgary?
I was in London at the time, and I was in a bookstore on Piccadilly called Waterstones. And like England, I mean, you can go to these bookstores and find out tremendous books on everything. And I found a book on the 92 football teams in the Football League in Britain. And I noticed every one of the stadiums, lower level or otherwise, was always in the center of the city. So I kind of got interested on a real estate play more than anything. And it had the numbers. So I just started phoning the local clubs in Southern England. And the chairman of Exeter City, one of these guys couldn't stand to see a phone ring. I just happened to pick it up, and I started talking to him. And next thing you know, he invited me out to watch a game between Cambridge and Exeter City. And I did, and I got involved and bought into the club. Really liked them, and we got along great. And actually, when I was back and forth then, I ended up meeting Tommy Wheeldon Sr., who was assistant manager at the time at Exeter City. And we hit it off.
How did you end up? What happened next? I mean, once you decided to get this going, what steps did you have to take to make it a reality to get a United Soccer League franchise going?
Well, it wasn't that difficult. I mean, they wanted to. The USL wanted to expand in a hurry. It was just a matter of paying the fees and sort of demonstrating you might know something about it. And because of my involvement with Exeter City, it was a fairly easy sell. So I bought the franchise. At the same time, I had heard about Thomas Niendorf, who had immigrated to Canada along with his wife, who was part of the East German national women's swim team setup. It was quite successful. And Thomas, of course, was a youth coach at Dynamo Berlin, which was backed by the Stasi and incredibly successful before the wall came down. After the wall came down, they went from European competition, I think, to the 4th or 5th level, almost automatically once everything dropped off. But Thomas was a good coach and was strict, had a great regiment. He knew his stuff inside out. So I kind of thought, the way soccer's exploding post 1994 World Cup in the U.S., I thought, this is going to go crazy here. So my feeling was, why not set up a feeder system in Calgary? This was easy to believe. Owen Hargreaves had been playing at an incredible high level in that over at Bayern Munich, but set it up in Calgary, have a feeder system going through Exeter City and going into the highest professional level. Why not? This should work, And Lars Hirschfeld, he got over there. We got him placed at Tottenham Hotspur. Nick Ledger came through us, and he went to 1860 Munich, I believe. And there's a few other ones that were in there. And, if I'm not mentioning everybody's name, please forgive me. But it did work in that sense. But we needed to have a highly defined training program that would really succeed. Tommy Wheeldon Sr. coming over was instrumental because it was a professional that played at Everton, that coached all the way through. He knew exactly what he's doing. Tommy Jr. came and played with the Storm, and we started going like that. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough money to go and here's a little aside as a segue where Dave Stadnick, who owned the Vancouver Whitecaps, was a friend of mine. He said, what the problem with soccer is? We spend all our day trying to figure out how we will only lose $400,000 this year instead of going out and making $1 million at business, which is what we should be doing. And there's a lot of truth to that. That was the problem with it all. I don't know how else to put it. But, you just can't. We couldn't lose money forever like that. He got out of it, and so did I. Jason, you knew it. You sat there and watched the whole thing.
Definitely. I think one of the things we wanted to ask about is, it sounds like the soccer operations piece of it, there was a very good and clear vision of what you wanted to do. But, from a business operations and marketing and revenue generating standpoint, there wasn't really a lot of positive precedents either in Calgary or for that matter in Canada to use as a blueprint. So how did you guys approach that?
That was part of the problem. To this day, does Calgary have a field house? No. Which is unbelievable. The lack of support from the city in terms of putting together proper playing conditions. Even what goes on right now where they playing at Spruce Meadows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so here we go again. You're not even in the city. Maybe it's part of the city now. I have no idea. But, there was a real lack of support in as far as the city of Calgary is concerned. And I think it continues to this day. But, it's tough. We went and saw Bron Kanye, and this is back with Mark McLaughlin, I think in 2001, and, talked to him and tried to get something going on. It was like, forget it. You couldn't even get $1 million together out of the city, which always has been sitting on money for any type of soccer, which is so weird because it was like the highest registration of any sport in Calgary, and you get zero. Again, well, I shouldn't say zero. They do a little bit, but not as much as you would have thought. They'll bend over backwards for hockey, not soccer. I think it continues to this day.
So the Storm played their home games out of Foothills Athletic Park near the University of Calgary and McMahon
Right.
Stadium. Very shortly before the Storm got going, Muada Stadium, which was right outside downtown, was demolished. And throughout the Storm's tenure, you talked to sports writers and said, this is the worst venue in the A-League. We can't make money off of it.
It was.
Do you feel like the Storm may have lasted a bit longer if Muada Stadium had remained?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You've got to, here we were Mark McLaughlin and I used to look at each other. We're running around pitching tents, because we couldn't leave any tents up, where we could try to have concessions or try to move stands in there through the city of Calgary. And then you're kind of going, what are we doing? We just cannot get any traction from the city of Calgary. And I'm not going to blame them. I mean, we went into this like big boys and all that. And, you know, I mean, as an aside, Mark has been chairman of First Calgary, and now he's the CEO of Kootenay Credit Union, you know, and he's not a stupid guy. These are all bright guys that are around it, and we just could not get it going with the city.
At Foothills Athletic Park, like I just want to sort of add this in. I know you mentioned about the facility not being great. Just imagine this, listeners, like there were no floodlights there. Like you couldn't play at night. The games had to be early evening, like where it's still enough sunshine so that you could play, so that you could see the field. So I think those Saturday games you would play at like 6 o'clock or something like that, or 7 o'clock in the summertime, so that it would still be, there'd be enough light out so you could play. And it was all porta potties. There was no washrooms. There was no other facilities. Like, you know, it was, like I said, we had
to pay for the porta potties too, right?
When it was time for Mawada to come down, I don't think there was a lot of opposition, but geez, you know, like if it would have been a couple years different, might have really like even a lot of work. But
you're bang on there. Timing is everything. It's really true.
Right on. Well, I want to ask about the team's kind of 3 years, because it started out as a PDL team and destroyed everybody almost until the final, and really generated a fan base. It just, as soon as the Storm went up to the pro level the following year, it didn't seem to, you know, with the same level of players, same roster essentially, wasn't able to keep competitive with US based teams.
No, we weren't. And that was right. You know, I guess, you know, in retrospect, if we would have gone to the next level would have been called D3, and we skipped over that. We had to get to the A-League level. We had to play against the Whitecaps, Toronto Lynx, and the Impact. We had to be in that milieu, we thought, if we were ever going to be taken seriously, and if we could ever crowbar our way into getting the city to build some appropriate facility, you know, whether it be like 3,000 to 5,000, you know, which wouldn't have been that difficult, you know, in retrospect. And even in trying to make a deal with the track and field guys, they had the sway over Foothills Park. You know, that was sort of deemed to be that way. And we thought, look, if we can work with these guys, get something done, get the city to put in some bleachers. And, you know, we were running by all these, just like they have now out at Halifax here for the Wanderers. They have these portable or temporary bleachers, but it'll do it. It'll work. And, you know, out here, I mean, they get 6,500, 7,000 a game, and it's one big party atmosphere. It's tremendous.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys see it on TV or not, but it's become a temporary venue that really works at Halifax Commons. But we couldn't get traction for it. You know, it just wasn't to be.
Let's talk a little bit more about how that, you know, the first A-League season, you know, it was a struggle on the pitch, and then it was, you know, time to do a bit of a switch on the coaching reins. And I know that you had Tommy Senior take over. I think was it almost halfway through the year, I think, that year?
Yeah, there was a lot of strife within the team at that point too. So, you know, I thought at the time, it's like, maybe we should get Tommy over. We need a change. We're on a losing streak. It's not working. Nothing's working. People are very, you know, grumbly, all this stuff. So what we did is we ended up changing and actually bringing in quite a few kids who were playing in the PDL, which still existed, and they became the nucleus of it. And we continued on like that, and, you know, you're terrible. But, you know, it was to be expected. You know, we really didn't have anybody that we thought would be that great. I mean, Lars, we sold and we got some money for, which was great, but that was just like putting a Band-Aid on an open wound. It was just going to bleed like this forever. So finally we just went, you know what? I can't really do this. We're not going to get anywhere with the city of Calgary. You know, I don't see anything on the horizon. Yeah. I just went, you know what? I'm just not prepared to go losing money year after year after year. I mean, I got to go, and somebody else can do it now. Mm-hmm. And somebody else ended up being a German fellow who I don't remember his name. He took it over and they rebranded it as the Mustangs. And I think that went for a year, and then it all went to sleep again.
Yeah. Jürgen Hanna was the.
Yeah. Nice guy.
Before that happened in the 2003 season, Mike, I know you recruited some players from the Caribbean. I was wondering if you could
Yeah.
talk about how it came to be that 4 Jamaicans came to play for the Storm.
I thought because soccer was exploding, I got on the board of directors of the Canadian Soccer Association as a professional representative. And so as part of that, I became like head of delegation for any of these national team trips. For instance, this one was the U17 team that went down the Caribbean. So while I was down there, we played at different venues. I met some of the owners of there's a Jamaican league, and part of it is that I got along really well with this one group who had some players, and they were willing to kind of transfer them over to us to play for a season and see if they like Canada. And I mean, and after seeing them, I thought, okay, these guys could play. So we brought them in fairly cheaply, and they were really good, 3 good guys. They formed the backbone kind of our defense and team. And a lot of the rest of the players were ex-PDL players from the year before. And I think we were 4-7 by the time I just went, okay, you know what? This is enough. We're never going to get anything out of the city. And I'm kind of done with this. So if we would have gone on, I think that was the right track we were on, though, at that point, if we were getting people out of like Jamaica and that, because these kids could play. There was a big difference. And the guys we had were actually not bad. We would have never won the league. But you know what? I think if we would have gone on another couple of years, like we'd have been a middling team in the league. You know, we were 4-7, so we were capable of winning at that point. We could see it. You know, it was better than what? Well, I think we had 2 or 3 wins the year before, right? Something like that. So not even halfway through the season, we were far better than we were last year. And we were competitive in the games we were losing. You could see that there would be progress.
You were kind of ahead of the curve in regards to sort of the model, like working with a team in Europe, creating a U23 team that played in the PDL. Like back in those days, that was kind of a really new concept. Now, you know, basically every pro team in North America has some variation of that, but back then it was uncommon. So the vision was kind of there, but yeah, the timing and stuff. So when
you know what, Jason, and you're right, you're bang on right. But what we always thought was, if we had enough players coming through that we could get to Europe, in people's eyes, we would be legitimate. You know, we could, and if we could build our youth system and give the kids proper training, we could, and we had a decent venue to play in, we could sell this. That was always my feeling. But, you know, when you don't have the decent venue, no matter how many kids you get across the water, you look like a loser. It's hard to, you know what I mean? No matter what you say. And you exhaust all the volunteers by trying to pitch tents and take them down every day after every game. The good legacy is that, you know, all the people that got out with soccer loved it. The Wheeldens have been fantastic for Calgary. I can't say enough. You know, they did a great job and still do. And when when Junior comes out to Halifax, I always go have a bite with him and have a chat and see what's going on and this and that. And I'm really happy. When I started that, you know, after reading Holger Osiek's Blueprint for Success and realizing, you know, if this was going to be a 20-year deal, I would have thought, okay, I get it. It's going to be that long. And that's really what happened. It has been that long to get us to a point where we are competitive. Now, you know, TSN does broadcast Copa America. We can win a game in Copa America, or we can play Argentina, and we have a bunch of chances, but, you know, we get beat 2-0. That's okay. We can all live with that. It's really taken that long to get to that point in time, you know, and it's not just me. I mean, there's been a host of other people, the Whitecaps, you know, and there's innumerable people that have been really putting a lot of time and effort into the whole pushing soccer forward in the country. But at least we're getting to the point now where I love it on TV. Everything that happens, I mean, you know, before we really wouldn't have this degree of success or luck, but it's been fantastic.
You're on the East Coast now, but do you get out to Calgary much? Do you get back here? And have you been to a Cavalry game?
Yeah, I still own a couple businesses back there, so I do go back on occasion. But he asked,
I was curious if you've been to a Cavalry game before.
Oh yeah, no, I went in 2019, I think. And you know what I mean? I was talking with Tommy after, and I said, you know, you got to support these guys. I mean, even somebody like Junior, the guy lives, breathes, eats soccer. He's always selling it. He's a hard worker. And I mean, and he's done well. There is a legacy now. It's been bumpy, but you know what? It's worked.
We're really glad you were able to join us today because Scott's written this book about the history of professional soccer in Calgary. And, I think some of the stuff that happened, like, I'm old enough to remember it, but, I think it's really important that some of these stories about the days gone by don't get lost because, these were all the initial building blocks to lead to where we are today here in Calgary and for that matter, in the whole country.
Yeah, no, it's like that all over Canada. I'm not the only one. There's all kinds of people like that, from the old NASL to different leagues in Canada, this, that, everything, everybody's had their shoulder to the wheel because of the love of the game. You're going to have a few hiccups, but that's the way it goes. But now we're at that point where we're beating Peru. We're in the Copa America. Well, you couldn't even talk like that 20 years ago. There's no chance.
No, definitely.
No chance. But it's happened. And this is great. It's great for the sport and it's great for everybody involved with it.
Thank you for coming on and talking about your experience with the Storm. We really appreciate it.
Hey, and thanks, guys, and thanks for supporting soccer. It's tremendous. It's a good look.
After watching all those games back in the day in 2001, 2002, 2003, from my standpoint, at least, it was kind of interesting to hear some of the behind the scenes stuff of what was going on, because let's face it, it's been 20 years. I think that the statute of limitations on some of those things, it's like, I didn't really feel like he was holding back on too much. He just kind of said whatever he felt like saying.
Yeah, he was very candid, I think, with some of the shortcomings of the Storm and why the team didn't manage to survive more than a couple of years. It comes down to, and I mean, if you want to learn all about the Storm, I'd suggest you could read my book, Here Come the Cavalry. But no, there's a lot of issues that the Storm ran into, including, the state of their home pitch, Foothills Athletic Park, kind of limited resources, inability to attract and retain fans. Timing was a little bit off. Like, they started up just a few years after Moata Stadium was demolished, and that was a really central location. You literally couldn't have been more central. Obviously, I think most of our listeners know the Storm fizzled out, but it was neat to hear from one of the people who were very involved with that project.
One of the other things I think is really interesting is that I just sort of want to touch on too, is that how easy it was to get a team. It was,
it's not like MLS these days, is it?
Well, I don't know what the expansion fee is to get into USL Championship right now, but I think it's probably like many millions of dollars. And I don't know, he never said what it was to get into the A-League, but it wasn't a substantial amount. It was relatively easy to get into the pro soccer game back then. Like, you had to have money, but it wasn't like the crazy amount of money that you have to have now.
And I like what you did here in our notes, Jason. You wrote down not all, but a lot of the USL teams, and you wrote down who is still around and what league they're playing in and which have gone defunct. So I think we should rattle these off before we segue to a different topic.
In 2003, which was the final year of the Storm, and then the next year the Mustangs came, but there were 19 teams in the A-League. Who are the surviving clubs? Now, admittedly, some of these teams are not exactly in the same form or ownership, but essentially their DNA is definitely embedded with current teams.
I mean, if you look at the MLS contingent, that would include Montreal Impact, Seattle Sounders, Vancouver Whitecaps, Portland Timbers, all teams that the Storm had to play against. And if you go down to USL Championship, we still have the Pittsburgh Riverhounds with their beautiful stadium and the Charleston Battery.
Dial it down to the third level of pro soccer in the United States. The Richmond Kickers, they were around this year in the A-League and they're still around and still, I think, pretty successful too.
Yeah, and then Charlotte Eagles are still around in USL League Two. But then we have a list of teams that have not survived, and I was actually disappointed to see this because I didn't even realize they were gone. But the Rochester Raging Rhinos.
I realize this is a Calgary soccer podcast, but I think people would have no idea when I say this, but at that point in time, they were incredibly popular. They were winning championships. They were getting over 10,000 fans a game. They were outdrawing a couple MLS teams. And at one point there, the Kansas City MLS team was toying around with the idea of moving to Rochester. That was very close to happening, but they sure fallen off because, I don't know what year they actually went under, but yeah, that's they don't exist anymore.
Yeah. And then Canadian example would be the Toronto Lynx, and I think we could all estimate or know why they didn't survive. But other teams that have since left include Syracuse Salty Dogs, Virginia Beach Mariners, Atlanta Silverbacks, Cincinnati Riverhawks, Indiana Blast, Minnesota Thunder, Milwaukee Wave United, and El Paso Patriots, quite a few of whom were in Calgary's conference.
Fun looking back at those old times. And yeah, thanks again. It was a lot of fun. And if you enjoy all of this talk of the old days and what it was like back then, make sure to get your hands on a copy of Scott's book.
Hi, this is Grace Doherty, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Yeah, so we're going to finish our episode this week with discussion of a game that just finished a few hours ago, Jason. And I saw you were tweeting about this game, and you caught some of it. Cavalry U21s recently traveled to Kamloops to take on Fulham U21s. The English club's U21 team has been on like a trip to Canada.
The match was on YouTube, so I paid attention to it. I didn't catch the whole thing, but I caught a good chunk of it, and definitely the end part. The final score was 1-1, and they decided to do a shootout to determine the victor, and Cavalry won. They won 5-3 on penalty kicks.
Yeah, and I can't say I watched this game, but I did tune in for a very brief period, and it was actually right before Cavalry's goal, which was scored by Nico Moroniak. Looping shot, it must have deflected, but that put them up 1-0. And then I saw that Fulham had tied later, and yeah, as you mentioned, Cavalry prevailed in the shootout, and apparently they have their goalkeeper to thank for that.
Yeah, Joe Holiday was really, really strong in the shootout, and actually, and in the other parts of the match I saw, he made some good saves, and yeah, was definitely one of the more notable players out there. I think another player who Cavalry fans might have a little bit of familiarity with was U Sports draft pick Rodane Cato, who played for Foothills this year. He looked really good out there, and I believe the commentator said that he was the best player on the pitch at one point near the end of the match.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rodane Cato he plays for University of Alberta, I believe, in the U Sports season, but has been with Foothills for this League One campaign. But yeah, like you mentioned, Cavalry draft pick. And another name that I think Cavalry fans will recognize who actually assisted on Nico Moroniak's goal is Michael Harms, who had a couple of appearances last year, but hasn't managed to break into the first team lineup yet in 2024. Although I did see him at training when I went last week.
He has been on the bench a couple times, but he played the full 90 in this, and he actually scored one of the penalty kicks. And I got to tell you, Scott, like I went onto YouTube and clipped out the Cavalry U21 PKs. Man, those are some confident kids. I was very impressed with their ability to go up in a shootout, and they executed really well. They looked super confident. And Michael Harms was one of those guys. He scored a really nice penalty kick.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
The last thing I want to mention about this matchup was that Cavalry U21s brought in a couple players that weren't with their League One team this year. And one of them was the Golden Boot winner of League One Alberta this year, Owen Antoniuk.
Yeah, who I've brought up in a couple of episodes lately. It was cool to see that he did travel with the team for this game. He obviously had a great season for Foothills, played a key role in their resurgence to become a finalist and second place finisher in the regular season. Yeah, I mean, if you want to list off the players in the lineup, Joe Holiday in net, James McGlinchey, Max Bordutha, who was actually a Halifax draft pick, Gabriel Smith, Michael Harms, Josh Belbin, Spencer McCallum, Rodane Cato, Nico Moroniak, Shannon Chanda, and Owen Antoniuk. A few of those names people probably remember or know, but keep an eye out on this U21 team because clearly they had a pretty decent season in League One and they have some gems in their lineup.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other podcasting platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our new YouTube channel. We also have links to buy Scott's book online. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of the website. You can also interact with us on social media, such as Twitter or Instagram, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.